The phone buzzed on my desk at 12:17 a.m., cutting through the silence like a warning shot. I was alone in the 23rd floor offices of Apex Financial Group in Chicago's Loop District, the city lights flickering outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. My name is Alexandra Harper, Alex to the few who really knew me, and for 9 years I'd been the senior risk strategist keeping this place from imploding under its own weight. The caller ID showed legal counsel, and I knew exactly why they were pinging me now. Alex. The covenant exposure on the interlock schedule, it's lighting up red across 3 layers we didn't flag in the Q4 deck. The voice on the other end was tense, almost breathless. The CFO needs you to verify before the board call tomorrow. Can you pull the original mappings? I didn't flinch. My fingers hovered over the keyboard where I'd been reviewing the very same audit logs for the past 2 hours. My employee badge still dangled from my hip, a half-forgotten weight after the holidays. If they thought freezing my salary would make me vanish quietly, they had clearly forgotten who had woven the intricate safety nets holding their house of leveraged debt together. Every shell company, every cross-default trigger, every offshore entity, I had mapped like scars on my own skin. I had placed them there not as traps, but as lifelines. But only if you knew how to navigate them. For nearly a decade, I'd lived in the footnotes of their presentations. Senior risk strategist. Never the face on the earnings call. Never introduced at investor dinners. But when a merger threatened to drag us into regulatory quicksand, they called. Always desperate. Always after hours. Alex, can you take a quick look? And I always did, until January 3rd. That morning, the compensation alignment memo had dropped like a guillotine. Corporate language for we're punishing you for doing your job too well and too invisibly. My name was the only one singled out in black and white. Senior risk strategist compensation frozen, pending realignment of deal expectations. Everyone else received vague, departmental guidance. I alone was named, labeled for inconsistent risk thresholds. Inconsistent. The word burned. They were referring to the biotech deal I had blocked right before Christmas, a $12 million credit facility laced with hidden litigation risks from a partner under SEC scrutiny. I had flagged the footnotes in their 10Q filings, argued in 3 emergency meetings, and held the line even when the CEO called me overly cautious. The board quietly backed me. 3 weeks later, that partner's stock cratered 68% in one session. Apex walked away clean, saving over $3.8 million in potential exposure. And my reward? A salary freeze and a memo that painted me as misaligned with the company's vision of agile growth. I read that memo 4 times, letting the condescension sink in until it etched itself into memory. Then I closed the PDF without a word. No HR meeting. No email to my team. They were already buried under 2 acquisitions and a divestiture. They didn't need to know the foundation was cracking. Instead, I opened my private encrypted archive, 5 years of interlock schedules, entity exposure paths, trigger thresholds, cross-default vectors, all audited, watermarked with my invisible digital signature because I had learned never to fully trust the people above me. At the time, I didn't call it revenge. I called it insurance. Asset networks aren't static. They're relational. One ignored breach. And the dominoes don't fall, they multiply. I ran a silent diagnostic. 3 red flags surfaced immediately. Minor on the surface, but chained together like loaded grenades. A new Delaware shell entity, a debt servicing lag of 38 days, and an intercompany remittance delay between subsidiaries in Singapore and Dublin. I packaged the findings, uploaded a clean version of the full interlock schedule into the master system, time-stamped and quiet, then placed my badge gently in the drawer and logged out. The house looked stable, but the wires were humming with warning. The next morning, standing in line for coffee at the corner cafe near the river, the freezing January wind biting through my coat. I pulled up the internal memo on my phone. 2025 compensation realignment, tiered sustainability focus. Buried in the legalese was the sentence that confirmed everything, due to inconsistent expectations and impact variance. Senior risk strategist compensation frozen until further notice. My name alone. No one else's. I stared at it while the barista called my order twice. The black coffee tasted bitter, matching the knot in my chest. I had blocked exposure to unstable counterparties 3 times last year. Flagged a convertible note with dilution traps. Caught a vendor pipeline tied to an OFAC-flagged entity. All documented. All acknowledged in audit trails. And the biotech save? I had held firm while finance pushed hard. Now this memo framed my caution as a liability. Passing Logan from finance on the stairs later, he offered a fake casual smile. "Hey, Alex. Saw the memo. It's not personal, just fiscal discipline." I stopped mid-step. Of course it's not personal. It's strategic blindness. "Thanks, anyway." He started to reply, but I was already walking. No point wasting breath on people who mistake silence for weakness. At my desk, the audit trail confirmed the memo wasn't just insulting, it was reckless. They had publicly undermined the one person who held the keys to their dead architecture. My credentials were still active. The vault was still signed with my digital key. Either they planned to patch fires without me, or they had genuinely forgotten how deep the fault lines ran. I ran one final forensic scan using the passive monitor I'd coded years earlier under a legacy utility header. Threshold variances lit up. The new shell, AXP 92, showed a remittance 41 days late. Just enough to breach the leverage cap I had written into the original 2018 protocol after a prior market scare. The cross-default net was live, spanning 29 entities. I uploaded a read-only diagnostic to the audit folder, archived the full original under my private key externally, and packed my things in 7 quiet minutes. Laptop, charger, a USB drive that technically shouldn't leave the building. I logged out at 9:51 a.m. No goodbyes. No tears. The elevator doors closed on my reflection, calm on the surface. But inside, 10 years of quiet loyalty were already replaying like a warning reel. They never noticed the walls I held up until they started to crack. The cabin 2 states away in northern Wisconsin was my quiet refuge, simple wooden beams, a wood stove, and miles of frozen forest. I had driven there straight from the office. The highway empty under gray skies. That night, around 11:23 p.m., my phone vibrated on the nightstand. A blind-copied Treasury thread, preliminary Q1 board deck materials. Muscle memory made me open it despite everything. The slides were polished, full of reassuring language and neat charts. But slide 13, the Covenant Health Overview, stopped my breath. The original 2018 asset seizure and cross-default protocol I had spent months drafting after the previous bond collapse was gone, replaced by vague boilerplate. In the event of unanticipated creditor distress, Apex reserves the right to pursue commercially reasonable remedies. Commercially reasonable. The phrase was soft, toothless. My original Clause 4.2b had teeth. Automatic liens across 29 flagged entities upon any threshold breach or remittance lapse. No board approval required. It had contained 2 near misses in 2020 and 2022. Now sanitized. Stripped from the deck without revision log or metadata. They had done it in the dark, assuming no one would notice. I sat in the dark. Phone screen the only light. Heart steady, but pulse quickening. Someone upstream was rewriting history because the safeguards felt inconvenient. I pulled the original notarized 2018 protocol from my external vault. Clause 4.2b stared back, Any breach in leverage threshold or 90-day remittance cadence across Appendix entities triggers immediate cross-default enforcement. Appendix listed the shells, including the new AXP 92 inserted quietly last spring. Pulling the latest debt servicing records confirmed it. AXP 92 was 43 days late on remittance. Just late enough. That single slip tugged the entire net. I didn't feel rage exactly. More like a cold clarity. They had walked me out thinking I was replaceable. A spreadsheet obsessive they could sideline with a freeze and a shrug. But I hadn't built safety nets alone. I had built consequences. The pressure valve was now armed because they had disarmed their own parachute. The next morning at 8:42 a.m., the boardroom lights came on in Chicago.
Coffee poured.
HDMI cables connected. Smiles rehearsed for the quarterly performance theater. From my cabin, wrapped in a hoodie with Burn Diner coffee in hand, I logged into the live board materials portal using credentials they had never revoked. I had designed half the permission layers myself. No one had touched the old scripts. At 8:48 a.m., I uploaded a single news slide labeled Clause 4.2b Cross-Default Activation Forecast. Title bold. Unreported breach via AXP 92 entity. Trigger threshold past December 29, 2024. Below, a color-coded cascade map. One entity red. For amber. The rest flickering. Notation at bottom. Original clause notarized and validated 2018. Last confirmed active per Q4 audit chain. The slide synced silently to every device in the room. No explosion at first. Just a pause. A pause long enough to crack the facade. I didn't watch the feed. I didn't need to. The protocol was live now. And legal's job was to recognize nightmares when they activated. The board call hadn't even formally started when the first voice broke the scripted rhythm. From the audio snippets that later filtered back through old channels, I could picture it clearly. Amanda from Strategy spoke first, voice hesitant. Wait, what is this slide? It wasn't in the packet. Silence followed. Thick and heavy. The CFO, Marcus Hale, chuckled nervously. The vein in his neck probably twitching as it always did under pressure. That must be a system glitch. It wasn't supposed to be there. An older director cut in sharper. Is this some kind of joke? They were staring at the red lines now. The words unreported breach burning in the corner. Then the general counsel's voice came through, cold and precise. Marcus, Clause 4.2b is still active. There is no record of rescission. No board vote. No legal sunset filing. The CFO stammered, lips opening and closing. We phased it out last year during simplification. It was legacy weight. The GC didn't rise in volume. It was never sunset. This is an internal breach on AXP 92. The remittance lag crossed the threshold. Whispers rippled. Which entity? One of the new shells from finance. Does anyone know who uploaded it? The CEO's low tense question hung unanswered. Of course they knew. Only one person had authored the original mappings and kept the clause alive in the shadows. Only one person they had tried to bury with a salary freeze. Me. The power had shifted in that single silent upload. Not with shouting or lawsuits, just one ghost slide in their perfect narrative reminding them who had actually built the foundation. They had staged their empire on my protocols. And now those protocols had returned home. At 10:05 a.m., my inbox chimed. Subject: Clarification and Transition. Polished corporate panic in 8 paragraphs, requesting discussion on contractual interpretations, mutual alignment on exposure implications. Revisit the legacy surrounding Clause 4.2b in good faith. Translation: We didn't think you'd remember what you built. We didn't expect to need you again. But the adults in the room are asking for the architect. I stood. Stretched. refill my coffee, watched a cardinal land on the frozen porch railing, small,
calm, free.
Then I opened the payout schedule buried in Section 5 of the original interlock document, the one I had drafted with surgical precision during the 2018 crisis, when phones rang endlessly and a junior associate had cried in the break room as paper value evaporated. The clause was there, quiet but ironclad, in the event of an unreported breach tied to executive concealment or protocol modification. Original authors of cross-default provisions shall be compensated per emergency valuation Schedule B. Schedule B assigned tiered payouts for protective authors whose protocols mitigated systemic exposure post-sunset. They had forgotten it existed. I hadn't. I copied the exact language, pasted it into a reply with 2 sentences. My banking details remain unchanged. Kindly confirm remittance timeline. No greeting. No meeting request. I had written the rules. I didn't need to revisit them. The reply from legal came at 10:19 a.m. We are reviewing Schedule B now. Thank you for your clarity. I closed the laptop without smiling or gloating. I hadn't won in the conventional sense. I had simply stepped back into the space they left empty when they mistook my silence for surrender. They thought they had built safety nets. In truth, I had built consequences. By 2:14 p.m. that Thursday, the wire hit my account, 7 figures, clean and unannounced. No call, no NDA, no meeting. Compensation not for loyalty, but for leverage. I was on the cabin porch when the Q1 filing appendix hit the SEC site later that afternoon, bundled against the wind in an old sweater. Footnote 47 in the filing referenced the remediation payout tied to cross-default clause activation per 2018 interlock. No name. No drama, just the language I had written syllable by syllable during that locked office night 5 years earlier. The mountains stayed silent, letting the moment breathe. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda in legal, slide of the year. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. They had tried to erase the clause to streamline, to remove what they called legacy paranoia. Instead, it had carved itself permanently into the public ledger. Undeniable. I reached under the table for the black notebook I kept for moments of closure. On the back page I wrote simply, Clause 4.2b. Resolved. Then filed it away like the chapter had closed. But the story lingered in my mind long after. Sitting there with cooling coffee, I reflected on how corporations celebrate the loud visionaries while quietly relying on the invisible architects. How easily they sideline the very people who map the fault lines, only to scramble when the ground shifts. In the end, they hadn't gotten rid of me. Their own oversight proved I was indispensable by exposing the fragility they had ignored. The question that stayed with me, heavy in the quiet Wisconsin air, was simple yet haunting. When does protecting the system become protecting yourself from the system? And what does it say about loyalty when the only way to be valued is to become the consequence they fear? The empire kept spinning, but the cracks I had once sealed now carried my signature in the official record. Some truths, once revealed, refused to be buried again.